Thank you very much indeed for joining us for Series 2, Episode 3 of the Fit for the Future series that we've been doing. Is this lesson well planned? ? So start to look at the lesson, start to have a little look at what you can see. So we've got an inside space, we've got some coned areas, we've got some children working in zones. We've got children working in smaller groups for, a high level of repetition. A little bit of comment would be excellent in terms of, in your opinion, is this lesson well planned? And for me, looking at that lesson, I think it also depends on the lens you're looking through. So we quite rightly have said that we've seen children working in small groups, we've seen coned off areas, we've seen a safety sections in between the zones. We've seen a coach navigating around the practice, looking at individual groups. But for me, when I'm thinking about that lesson, is it well planned? What I want answering is, does the lesson have a clear objective? Are the pupils clear in no uncertain terms about what we want them to learn, what we want them to do? Where does this lesson that we're seeing fit into a medium-term plan? Does what they're delivering align to the national curriculum for PE? Ultimately, what is the process that the coach has employed before the lesson and during the lesson to ensure effective and efficient planning has taken place?
Kind of build on from where Chris has started, really, around some articles that I recently read that I thought were quite pertinent to the webinar. So on the left there, you've got an article from The Guardian. I believe this was a study by the UCL Institute of Learning. They were suggesting that teachers on average, as we know, spend about 47 hours a week working, with a quarter of those teachers actually spending more than 60 hours a week. The Telegraph, with an Ofsted survey, reported similar. They were saying that the teacher was spending about 22 hours in the classroom, but 29 hours dedicated to planning, marking, and other tasks. But just to kind of extend where we got to with the fun and engaging and exciting, for me, they need to be active. They need to be physically active if they're going to be engaged in the process. I always try and make it as child-led and child-focused as possible, so they'll have lots of opportunities to make decisions. They choose what entry points they come in at. They might choose how they travel with the ball, and then trying to match that level of challenge to the individual. So what can we do around the STEP principle to really get that child engaged? I've got on there messy, so I'm okay with a messy lesson, so embrace the chaos, as they say. So actually there's going to be lots of stuff going on, and it might look a little bit unorganised, but that's okay, because that's where I feel the learning happens. And then finally, the whole piece around social. So for me, PE is all about that social connection. So again, giving the children lots of opportunities to take the lead in the group or to give instructions. It might be they give some feedback to each other, but again, giving them lots of opportunity to make those social connections.
Just looking at the planning process now, what we're going to do is try and articulate a process to you in terms of how myself and Will go about planning. And I think it's really useful for you here to understand this. Myself and Will started exploring this webinar content probably around about 3-4 weeks ago with a view to trying to make sure that we were really clear in terms of our opinions on how to plan, what it looks like on the shop floor, if you like, when you're in the school and you're working. And ironically, we both probably came together with very similar terminology and a process in terms of what we and how we go about it. So over the next sort of like series of discussions and content, we're going to articulate probably around about 6 or 7 steps to you about what we would do. And I think the first thing that we look for when we're starting this efficient and effective planning process is that we want to look at prior learning. We want to try and establish what are the needs and wants of the children, what are the motivations, what have they done previously in the academic year around topics, concepts of the national curriculum PE. I think then as we progress on, we've started to look at prior learning, needs, wants, motivations. We need to now think about our children and how that fits into an academic year from a long-term plan perspective. So we have a 38-39 week academic year, predominantly in terms of our teaching time. We need to actually make sure the long-term plan of what we deliver in schools is directly aligned to the national curriculum for PE.
This is a real-life medium-term plan, so to give you a little bit of context, Upton St Leonard's is the local primary school to me in Gloucestershire. If we're going to be effective in our planning, then it needs to be really personal, and it needs to be informed, and this first stage is helping us get that personal connection with the children. moving on, so this would be page 2 of a three-page plan. This is where we start to narrow that curriculum down. So hopefully you can start to see some of the links to the PE national curriculum. I've used the 4-corner model there for the FA, and also just include the school's ethos. Again, if we want planning to be effective, then we need to start thinking about our school and the school identity. We then want to align it to the curriculum and obviously bring out those specific values. So they are the school's specific values for Upton.
Well, I think this is a really key point for everybody tuning in today. And I know the teachers, the trainee teachers and everybody joining in will resonate with this. This clear focus from a planning for learning approach that you're talking about really helps us determine the important from the less important things to attend to in our delivery. And school vision, mission and ethos statement. If a school states that they want children who are independent learners, who are, you know, very sort of like creative in their ways and they're good communicators, well, if that's what it says on the school vision and mission statement, well, ultimately we've got to bring that to life in our PE because we want to live and breathe that. And then we've got to align that to the curriculum. So for me, this clear focus that you've really articulated well there, Will, around this planning for learning context, really, really does help us focus on what is important and what's less important, and ultimately what do we need to focus on. So, you know, for me, a really good example, and looking forward to hearing some more.
We want this process to be a lot quicker. So here, this might be a 6 to 12 week block of work with 3 different learning objectives. Each learning objective might span over the course of 3 or 4 weeks. And the reason why I'm trying to build that into this medium-term plan is that it allows some fluidity in the planning and the delivery. So if the children aren't quite getting the whole idea of resilience, well, we might just take another week or 2 just to focus in on that. And that might mean that we bump the technical objective onto another medium-term plan. But we really want to start to be able to focus and offer some fluidity in our planning for our delivery and our lessons to be effective.
Great insights there, because we started to now think about needs and wants in front of us, prior learning, long-term plan, intermediate-term plan, and now what we've got to start thinking about is we've got our 6 to 12 week example there of the medium-term plan. We've now got to think about what that looks like in a short-term plan, so an individual lesson. There was a bit of a sample done in the Midlands in a study back in 2014 where the average PE lesson was 38 minutes from the moment it took to get the children changed to when the lesson finished. And ultimately in 38 minutes, you know, what can you achieve? How long does it take to learn something? So the idea of having a really narrow lens in terms of the medium-term plan of what we want to cover, where we're honing in on some specific areas, becomes even more crucial when I give you that concept of, you know, 38 minutes. So 6 times 38 minutes, if we're looking at half-term block, is not loads of time. So what you've got to remember is if we keep changing the theme every week, no learning is really going to take place. So the short-term plan has got to really replicate and mirror what's going on in the medium-term plan. So that narrow focus, that explicit focus. The actual session delivery being, does our lesson objective match the medium-term plan? Check 1. Are the pupils engaged with activities that are physically demanding and meet their start and challenge point? Check 2. Are we in a position where I'm using coach behaviours that my pupils are going to really respond to? You know, what's my balance like between questioning and feedback? What are my ways to allow maximum time on task for the pupils to have a go at things rather than stopping the session? How do I want to try and support children who maybe need a little bit of support? I don't want to stop the session and go and hone in on them and make an example. I might use some little drive-by examples and go and have a little chat to a person, support them and allow other people to move on. So that's probably check 3 for me. And then check 4, I think we've got to be really clever about the practice structures we use. So I'm linking back to some of our previous work now that you can see on our P-Unit webinar series on the FA Learning pages, which will direct you at the end, where we talked about adapting activities and engaging pupils in lessons. Practice structure becomes key. And then ultimately, it's about a review. What I like in a lot of medium-term plans I see is that in week 1, we've got a clear idea about what we want to do, but in week 1, we do a bit of a needs assessment with the children. So we might put on some activities that may be perceived easier, some, you know, mid-range tasks, and then some higher extending tasks, just to get a feel for where are the children at aligned to our medium-term objectives that we just talked about. And then ultimately, after that week 1, I've not got lesson 2 and lesson 3 already written. What I want to see is where they were at the end of lesson 1, and that'll inform my planning for lesson 2. I can't really explain about what we're going to do in lessons 3, 4, 5 and 6 because I'm not sure where we're at after lesson 1, lesson 2 yet. And that sort of like approach to reflection in action, if you like, is really important in making sure that you get the clarity of the objective coming out, and you're making sure that the activities that you're delivering meet the needs and wants of the children, and the children are really clear about what you want them to learn.
As you watch, just consider which learning objective from the medium-term plan that I've shared might be being achieved in this activity, and also can you start to identify some of my own personal philosophy within the game design.
Arrival activity, Kingpin. Players work in groups of 4, 3 attackers on the outside of the area and 1 defender in the middle, and a ball on a cone is placed in the centre. The game is played with the ball in hands to start. The attacking players have to pass the ball around the square to find space to knock the cone or the ball over. The player in the middle protects the cone and tries to intercept the ball if possible. To increase the challenge, play with the ball at feet. Challenge the players to create different variations of the game. You can award points for a successful number of passes. For example, 5 passes in a row earns a point.
Nice choice of pass.
Knocking the ball off the cone could be worth 3 points.
This would be page 1 of my short-term plan. So now we're looking at this individual lesson plan. So again, you can see that the objective has been taken straight out of the medium-term plan. So again, the efficiency is around, actually we've got the medium-term plan, we've got the objective, and we can just put it straight in to our short-term plan. And then this would be my second page of my short-term plan. All I've done here is just identify kind of 4 key areas that I look at in my planning. So again, I try and really streamline my thinking to aid my teaching and learning processes. So this session plan, if we link it back to the medium-term plan, it might last for 3 or 4 weeks, or 4 or 5 weeks, depending on the rate of learning of the students. And then finally, this whole idea of review, the whirlwind that is education. We're normally bouncing from lesson to lesson, and we don't always get time for this review, but that's probably a really important factor if we then want to then repeat the process and start from that informed position in the prior knowledge.
What we wanted to try and articulate to you was a process that both Will and myself employ. And we think that ultimately the process isn't just one way. Ultimately, through assessment for learning, if you like, in terms of we've got to have a real clear understanding about where our pupils are at, where we want to take them, and how we're going to get there. And I think it's really crucial that throughout this process, we're always maybe reflecting back on the previous steps to make sure that our planning is aligned, it's connected, and that the pupils are at the heart of it. And crucially here, in terms of the message that we talked about before, I think one of the biggest messages that we want to put across to you today is that the pupil is the curriculum. Understanding the who, if you like, the pupils in front of us, and how we can design curriculums around them that match their age and stage of development and are nested, if you like, in terms of national curriculum PE targets. This bit is really, really important for me.